Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of the Geeking Out podcast. I am the Athletic Geek, and my guest this week is the current Stride Pro Wrestling Legacy Champion, Roger Mathis. Uh, since I've been able to, pandemic's kind of cleared up a little bit, to where we're able to run shows again. Been hitting up the Stride shows and really been a huge fan of Roger's work. Been really excited to talk to him and glad I could finally get a hold of him to have him on the podcast. Roger, thanks for doing this.
My pleasure.
So my first question to all the wrestlers that come on the show is, were you a fan of pro wrestling growing up?
Yeah. It used to be a big family thing for us. We'd get together at my aunt's house. We'd order the pay-per-views. Obviously, at that time more WWF than WCW. You watch WWF, watch WCW. I'd go to my grandma's in Alton, and what was it? Global Wrestling Federation, something like that. I think they're out of Texas. X-Pac was there before he was X-Pac and an E and all that.
Okay.
I think he was Lightning Kid then or something like that. So, anytime I could get anywhere, watch wrestling, and getting older, ECW and New Japan and all the Japan stuff. And
okay.
yeah.
So, okay, you're obviously you're a big wrestling fan growing up. Who were, you mentioned some of your favorites. Did you have an athletic background growing up, or did you play wrestle, or did you think like as a kid, like I want to be a wrestler, so I gotta, train athletically or do sports to get ready, or were you just a kid playing sports, or did you even play sports?
I play sports. My dad was a football, wrestling, and track coach.
Okay.
Actually, he was what was he? I feel like he was defensive coordinator. I might be wrong. Might have been offensive coordinator for Glensley and Pinckneyville.
Okay.
Before coming to Marion, he was a wrestling coach at Pinckneyville. So I mean, I was on a wrestling mat before I could walk, and quality time was going to practices. So I think I started wrestling competitively in like the fourth grade, and then football somewhere there in junior high, and threw shot and disc.
Okay. You mentioned your dad being an amateur wrestling coach. Did he discourage the pro wrestling fandom at all?
Uh, I did everything I could athletically growing up.
Okay.
But yeah, wrestling was always professional wrestling, amateur wrestling. That was my first sport. That was my big love.
Okay. Was your dad?
That's the one thing I've always come back to.
Was your dad ever like mad about being the pro wrestling? Because I know a lot of traditional amateur wrestlers and coach. They're not really too keen on the professional wrestling for their own reasons. But how'd your dad feel about pro wrestling being your wrestling coach and a wrestling coach?
Yeah, he loved pro wrestling. He always got a kick out of watching it. I think he was such a history of anything, especially history itself, but even history of pro wrestling, where it started with the amateur wrestlers and submission grapplers and catch wrestlers, that there was nothing professionally for them to do, to still be in wrestling at the time.
Right.
So they kind of, they were in carnivals and in all those things, and it, growing from that, so a lot of guys, they say a lot of things, but they don't realize, Stu Hart, I think, if I remember right, he was an Olympic wrestler.
Right.
Hiro Matsuda was a legit grappler. That's who trained Hogan. People don't realize Hogan actually knew how to submission wrestle. If you go and you watch his work in New Japan versus his work in the States, it's a completely different style of wrestling.
Right, yeah.
So a lot of those guys had to know how to wrestle, and some of them you had to know just to be able to protect yourself in case you made somebody mad, because veterans knew what they were doing and could stretch you and hurt you.
Absolutely. And so what when you said you've always been about wrestling, so were you thinking on that wrestling mat? Were you thinking trying to be a pro wrestler? Were you thinking becoming the next Hulk Hogan, or were you kind of thinking in terms of like, well, let's go to college? Was this the dream,
Yeah,
or
I always liked wrestling. I think I always wanted to be a professional wrestler. We actually had a conversation when I got out of high school about going to be a pro wrestler as opposed to going to college because I did good in school. I wasn't stupid. I'm smart. I look. I'm fairly intelligent, or at least I think I am. Um, I wasn't allowed to be a dumb jock. I had to take hard classes. I had to do good. But by the time I was done with high school, I just kind of burnt out. Didn't want to do college.
right?
Um, God, what was it? I can't remember who ran it now, but like Heartland Wrestling Federation or something along those lines. And you go there as a school. They put you up in like an apartment. You basically went to wrestling practice. They help you find a job in the town, but it's basically what OVW became.
Okay.
Um,
Where was this place based out of?
I think it was still can't remember right now if it was Ohio or if it was still in Louisville, but it was kind of in that area.
Okay.
I can't remember. And it's about 20 years ago.
Okay.
But so there was that conversation. Obviously, they were against it, but life had other things for me as things developed with 9/11 and all that. I ended up joining the military because the war was breaking out, and I wasn't not going to be involved in that. So
So you
life intervened.
so was this so did you join the military about like after 9/11, or when did you join the military?
Yeah,
Okay.
I would. Yeah, it's I didn't have anything wrong with the military. It's just one of those. Something happened. There was going to be a retaliation, a war, and I don't fairly patriotic person, so like I wasn't gonna sit that out.
Right.
So
Which
uh,
which branch did you serve in?
I was in the army, and then I decided I was gonna be on the front lines, so I was in the infantry, and then I was airborne air assault, so I jumped out of planes and rappelled out of helicopters, and about any cool stuff you could do. They also at that time had switched over to what they call modern army combatives, which mixed like wrestling and jiu-jitsu and all that. So I also became combative certified, so I taught combatives classes, so hand-to-hand combat and all that. So
Um,
I.
well, we're jumping ahead just a little bit, but like your character, is very martial arts influenced right now in Stride. Is that
Yeah.
where you got a little bit of the martial arts training too, or did that kind of come while you were amateur wrestling?
A little bit came amateur wrestling. I mean, I think I took Taekwondo for a while when I was a kid, but like the UFC started coming out, seeing wrestlers, because I remember my dad would go watch nationals every year. So when you see guys like Dan Severn and all that, and they're doing pro wrestling or doing the cage fighting or Kevin Randleman, uh, my dad recognized their names from like them at the national championships.
Okay.
So I say, oh shit, okay, so these are like wrestlers, that are making this transition into this stuff. Um, wrestling, and that was one of his big things with wrestling. It's the last great hand-to-hand combat sport left in schools, and
It's a very
so
interesting
that
way
was
of putting it,
huge.
but I
So
see what he's saying. Yeah.
yeah, so I did that. Seeing the Gracies and all that, I was fascinated with jujitsu. Um, and then when I was in the army, right, combatives uses jujitsu. I'd seen some of it, and then at that time, I was fortunate enough to train in a gym in Tennessee that the jiu-jitsu coach was a guy by the name of Elio Sinetka, and he was the 1996 Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu World Champion and 97 Pan American Games gold medalist. So I started
Wow.
jiu-jitsu with him, and then later on, as I was out of the military and doing fighting, I ended up out in Colorado with Alvin the Kid Robinson, and he's himself a Hoist Gracie black belt. Uh, I mean, and when I say that, I don't mean like he was at a gym and Hoist was coming in and would do a seminar and give guys a belt. He actually trained with Hoist on a very regular basis for years.
Okay. Um,
And that's my jiu-jitsu coach, my friend, my confidant. I bounce everything off him to this day.
um, just to give a little context for those that don't, kind of just see UFC or kind of see martial arts, and don't really understand, the work that goes
Yeah.
into it. If you were to somebody that's never really thought about martial arts training and going through a fight camp, like the ones you mentioned, what is the best way to describe such a fight camp to them? Like
Ooh.
what the training's like, what it the mental, physical,
Yeah.
the conditioning. Take us through something like that.
It is. I always think of it is one of those you got to sweat more. You got to sweat more in practice, so you bleed less in the fight.
Okay.
So it's when you got fights coming up, and depending on how far out you know about it, let's say it's 2-3 months. That you got 8 weeks. That last week's gonna be chill because that's fight week. But that 8 weeks, you're drilling everything. It's 3 to 4 hours a day on top of whatever um, you know lifting training you might be doing, but you're getting conditioning and wrestling and boxing and kickboxing and all this stuff in and sparring. And I was training with Lashley out at American Top Team
Okay.
for a few years. And Boogeyman came in one day and he goes, "Big Rock, you done fighting and wrestling like Bobby? Like, man, what's worse on the body?" "Man, it's wrestling." "You go, really?" I'm like, "Yeah, like it's a fight. It's hard, but you do the fight and then you take a couple weeks off and you heal up. And wrestling, you try to do this stuff every night. But man, those fight camps, I mean, they could be vicious, and you got a bad day and you've really got to mentally check yourself that it's okay. It's a bad day, but we made this day to be a bad day to make the fight easier, so you can get through it. So I mean, some of those fight camps, they were vicious, but
Uh,
that's the nature of the beast.
okay, it's you mentioned Bobby Lashley, and it's just you're. I asked you earlier about kind of there's the stigma with amateur wrestling and pro wrestling, and how your dad felt about that being an amateur wrestling coach. Do you feel that now there's a little bit less of a stigma about pro wrestling in the MMA world with people like Bobby Lashley, who has done both and was able to return, like Brock Lesnar, all these different Jake Hager, all these different pro
Right.
wrestlers doing MMA, and sometimes both at the
Like
same time.
crossover.
Yeah. Do you feel like now
I,
the MMA community, maybe they may not really latch on to pro wrestling, but do you feel like now they finally kind of not to, I don't really want to use the phrase because trying to not offend anyone here, but the fake and blank phrase that a lot of MMA fans used to use towards pro wrestling. You think that the MMA community's kind of coming around on that?
I think so. I think especially when you have guys that do both and they can tell you like, yeah, this is vicious. Whether
Right.
it's a fight or it's pro wrestling, like things hurt. That mat is not a trampoline. It's wood and steel.
Right.
Uh, and I think you see the guys kind of do both, even do both at the same time. And I think everybody kind of has a mutual respect, and I think everybody's kind of learning how to take certain things, even from the other ones, to make themselves better.
Right.
You can't tell me that some of these fighters, especially a guy like Kobe, who was at American Top Team with Lashley and some of them, and King Mo. I know he's not there now, but have not learned how to sell a fight from some promo stuff in pro wrestling, and has made them worth more money.
Right. I mean,
I mean, Chael Sonnen is a great fighter, but when he started cutting some of those promos for fights, the amount of money he made doubled or tripled. And Colby Covington, I mean, he's even said himself he was about to be let go by the UFC, and then he started basically just kind of putting that persona into the press days. You know, like him or hate him,
Right.
people are going to buy the pay-per-view now when he's on it.
So, kind of, we jumped a little bit ahead of ourselves. So, kind of backtracking a little bit. You know, you joined the military. How long did you do in the military?
6 years.
Okay. So six. No, go on. I'm sorry.
No, I did 6 years, and I was in the 506, which was, I mean, that's, Band of Brothers and all that in World War II.
Okay. Was it after your military days? You know, like what was that when you decided to really pull the trigger on pro wrestling training, or were you kind of toying with it before? You know, before
No,
deployment.
I'd done some pro wrestling training when I was 18, and I even had, my first couple shows back then. So name's familiar with AAPW. I trained for a while under homicidal Stephen Davis.
Awesome.
Uh, and at one time, first few shows we went on, because it's when Bud was still the promoter. He had
Okay.
the promotion only, and he went everywhere. So, like, my first show was Terre Haute, Indiana for Bud.
Okay.
And actually, at one time, I was actually like the bodyguard for homicidal Stephen Davis.
Interesting.
Uh, yeah. So, I was doing some of that. The 9/11 happened, so then I left the military. I did my time deployment and all that stuff there. Before I was out, I'd started getting into fighting. It's kind of some of that was starting to take off. And then I ended up out in Colorado, and that's, like I said, I trained with Lashley out there. Before I was with Lashley, I was out at Grudge, which I think is now Genesis. But that was Trevor Whitman, and he's the coach for Thug Rose and Usman, like striking coach, and Justin Gaethje. And at that time, that's when I think Gaethje was still amateur when I got there, and we had Alvin Robinson, we had Shane Carwin, we had Nate Marquardt, we had Dwayne Bang Ludwig, who's actually the coach for TJ Dillashaw now. And so I was out there with them for a while. Then I ended up out there with Lashley. And then I guess, I can't remember, I think somebody wanted to put a pro wrestling ring in Bobby's gym.
Okay. Now,
And,
when you were doing your first stuff, just not to cut you off, but were you
yeah,
trained by Stephen Davis, or who was the trainer when you were kind of doing your
I
military?
was trained by Stephen Davis.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Were you part of Livewire McGuire's kind of circle, or a little bit before him?
No, I think I was before him. So
Okay.
I mean, I go back far enough with Stephen Davis when Shane Rich, actually before Shane Rich was in the Air Force.
Okay.
Aaron Ondo was there. Tommy Calloway, and a lot of those guys. I mean, I think very short-lived. There was Attitude Championship Wrestling for a little bit with Stephen Davis before AAPW. So I mean, I even predate some of those AAPW guys.
Okay. So you get when you get back, you say Lashley wanted to put a wrestling ring in the gym. Is that where you kind of picked it back up a little bit, or what was the process of getting back in the wrestling game from there?
He wanted to put he ended up putting one in there. Somebody got hold of him about putting one in there, and they wanted to put a training school in there. And I was there, and I had some buddies in the pro wrestling business out already in Colorado, and I went out. There's a company out there called Primos, and they're really popular. They kind of have this. It's the Slave to the Death Match tournament. They do it every year and it's kind of the biggest in my opinion, it's the biggest deathmatch tournament here in the state. And I went to go watch it one year because I knew some of the guys on it and wanted to go support some friends. And a couple of the people there saw me and were like, "Man, you should be doing this, not sitting in the crowd." And I talked to my buddy Tony Morales, who was a wrestler, and with one of the other companies also. And he's like, I already talked to my promoter. We'll come to the next show. And so I talked to Zach Bowman, who's the promoter of New Era Wrestling out there, and then I was back in the wrestling business and worked for New Era, worked Primos. We went out to Salt Lake City. I think it was UCW 0.
Okay.
Martin South, Marty the Moth was out there, and then we were making trips down to Amarillo, Texas, for Top of Texas, and Jake Logan. He's kind of all over the place now. He's was the youngest NWA North American champion.
Okay.
He was out there at Top of Texas, and then just started making loops.
And what year was this?
Man, I'm bad with years. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe 2011, 2012.
Okay.
Somewhere in there, I think. It could have been 2010, but it all gets foggy. Everything kind of blends together. We were sitting here at my house actually talking earlier today and realized today is the 4-year anniversary of me and Hatton in a TLC match for the Stride Heavyweight title. It's like, man, I don't feel like it's been 4 years.
Right. So we'll get to Stride here in a bit, but okay, you mentioned you were really in the the Amarillo, Colorado, Utah kind of independent wrestling scene. How would you describe the wrestling scene out there? Because, and I'm not knocking the promotions or anything that happens out there, but it's not really, when you hear about all like the quote unquote big indies that are out there,
Yeah.
you don't really hear a lot about those states. So what is the wrestling scene like? Is it a really hot scene? Is there a lot of good fans, or is it something that's just kind of, good for the locals? What is the wrestling scene like in that area?
I mean, the fans are good. They really are. Like, they get, they get good crowds on a regular basis. The promoter at Primo's, he, especially like when it's Slave to the Death match, he gets some of the top guys in the business out there. And even some of the other shows, he's able to put up the money to bring guys in, some name guys. But in all reality, like, even their local talent is really good. Like I said, with Utah, they had some guys out there. I feel like I've seen one or two of the girls from out there on either NWA or AEW. Of course, Marty was just on AEW this last week. Guys in Colorado, you got Rob Risen is signed up with AEW, and he's worked, even in enhancement talent roles for NXT and Impact.
Right.
But he's a regular now at AEW. Sam Udell was out there in Colorado, was in NXT, came back to Colorado, and he's now Ring of Honor. That's Dak Draper. He's amazing out there at Ring of Honor. Otis in WWE is out there from Colorado. I think he was working with Rocky Mountain Pro, which is another company out there. It's funny because you don't hear a lot about it, but they get some talent out there, right. And they get some people that go places. They actually have a girl out there now that she works with Rocky Mountain Pro, Lilith Grimm, and she signed to OVW.
Okay.
And she makes, whenever they call her name up for TV, she's flying from Colorado, Louisville, and then she'll go fly from there out to North Carolina and wrestle a weekend, and then fly back to Colorado, and she's making TV tapings for the local promotions there. So I mean, I feel like it's kind of like this really interesting kind of little kept secret of the wrestling industry.
Right. So, what made you eventually? What led you to leave that area to eventually kind of come back to the Midwest, and what led you to Stride Pro Wrestling?
Uh, well, in the ring and everything was going good, and it was before a show, and Tommaso Ciampa was there, and I turned in the ring, and my femur came out of my knee joint.
Oh wow!
So we all thought it was dislocation. We thought it was my kneecap. I had this bulge inside my leg. Tommaso Ciampa is literally sitting with my knee kind of in pieces on his knees with an ice pack waiting for an ambulance.
Oh, and what year was this? Just give me more context. I mean, if you can remember, or
it should be 2014, I believe.
Okay.
Maybe 2015.
Gotcha. Okay, carry on. I'm sorry.
And no, it's quite right. So my knee is I give me the ER. They've reset my knee. Cool. They want to keep me for an MRI. All right, cool. And that's kind of I came to, and they're like, so that bulge in your knee wasn't your kneecap, it was your femur.
Oh my
We
God.
want to do an MRI because if that came out, we're worried about ligaments. And all right, cool. So I talked to my dad because he was still here in Southern Illinois, and I fly out because the VA here had a deal with Washington Orthopedics, which were the sports medicine docs for the Blues, the Rams, the Cardinals. Because I wanted good docs so I could get back to doing things I enjoy.
Right.
And we get some more imaging, a bunch of x-rays done on my knee, and it turned out when that femur came out, it ruptured my ACL, my PCL, and my MCL. So there was nothing left to reattach. So I had surgery, and they literally drilled inside my femur and inside my tibia bone and took cadaver ligaments. And that's so a cadaver MCL, PCL, and ACL is what's in my left knee now.
Oh, wow.
And so then
I'm in shock
long
after hearing
rehab
that.
process.
Especially
Yeah.
seeing you go
So-
like how you do in Stride, it's just like, holy shit, how does he do
Yeah.
this?
So I wanted to. I obviously wanted to get back to what I wanted to do, and I very extensive rehab, and at that point, obviously, I still wanted to power lift and some of these other things I wanted to do. So I ended up at Gold's Gym because there's one here in Marion, because that was just the only place to, it was one of the only places to lift, and I ended up there, and then Hatton's there, and we just get to talking about the wrestling business and people we knew and all this, and it just so happened like right around that time was Stride was kind of getting invented, and it was like, well, hey, we got a show here, why don't you come check it out, see if it's something you want to be involved in. So I'm like, well, why not? So I would check it out. Obviously I liked the product, I liked some of the things they were doing.
What was it
And
that, what was it that when you first, because I mean, you pretty well saying you saw Stride pretty close from the ground up. What was it about
Right.
the Stride product in the Stride locker room that really just made you go like, wow, I want to be part of this. I like Stride. Like, what was it about that show and the atmosphere that made you want to go through such a rehab to be a part of it?
Well, I'd seen, I obviously seen Hatton's work in places he'd been before. I knew Stephen Davis very well. He was involved in the beginning, and Frank White and some of those guys. You got familiar. I've seen, followed careers of Chris Hargis was there. Another big athletic, guys that, put the work in. They could do everything. They also looked the part. They were, they had the backgrounds that It's not just believable because they looked it; it's believable because they lived it.
Right.
You know, and this is kind of the same thing in Colorado. You got a lot of guys that they put the work in. There's not a whole lot of guys that are out there, you know, slacking or looking crappy. And if you are slacking, they rotate you out real fast.
Right.
So you know, and like I said, I wanted to be back in wrestling. It's just like goals with powerlifting. So I still, I wanted to get this rehab back so I could powerlift. And November I did my first powerlifting meet, and actually was a weight class up than what I should have been, and still was strong enough to place in the top three. Literally outside of weight class. So, yeah, anything they told me that I shouldn't be able to do again. Yeah, I don't believe you. I think I can do it.
What?
No man can set a limitation on me. I set my limitation.
That's phenomenal. You mentioned what was I just got to ask now? What's the rehab like for something like that? Because I know it. If that ever happens to me, like I'm any sort of minute athletic aspirations that I still
Yeah,
have in my life, that's gone. Like I'm content to just sit out my days sitting in a recliner and drinking beer at that point if I get something like that done for me. So what
yeah,
was the rehab like, and just like what was? I mean, you said you like nobody's gonna keep you down. Like what you mentioned
yeah.
powerlifting, wrestling. Was there like something that you tell yourself through this rehab? Like it's got to be pretty intense rehab. That's like this is my goal. Like what were you telling yourself throughout all of this rehab? What was you know do you have
Man,
a vision of
it
where
was
you want to
just,
be, or
yeah, it was one of those, like I can get back from this, like this is gonna suck, this is gonna hurt, this is gonna hurt. Like a fight camp. This
right,
has to be hard. This has to be vicious, so that the stuff I want to do becomes easy. Saying, I mean, it's a lot of just, obviously there's a lot of lifting stuff, or, you're on a bike just trying to get blood flowing in the knee. Even a lot of balance stuff where you're picking up one foot and touching cones, and then trying to balance on the bad foot and touch cones, and, try to balance and catch something, and, just a lot of, just even working the balance. And then there's, obviously, I got to go ahead where I could start squatting and stuff like that again. But it is pretty much like I could squat and I could leg press and all that. Anything where my foot was stationary,
right.
I wasn't allowed to do a leg curl or a leg extension for like a year and a half,
That's the
because if I did, they said that the ligament would stretch out too much during the healing, and my tibia bone would just fall out of socket.
that's
So I literally,
very
yeah, I literally
interesting.
had to wait. I had to wait even like a year and a half just to do even like a light leg curl.
Because like
Uh,
whenever I'm far from as good a shape as you. I mean, I'm not even in good shape. But I mean, when I go to the gym, like, and I'm doing legs day, it's like, leg press and squat. Those are those are the hard ones. Like it's
yeah,
the leg curl and leg extension. That's man. That's gonna say it's easy. You got to challenge yourself. But it's like, oh, this is like, hey, I'm sitting down. I'm getting a good
right,
pump. Like my knees aren't gonna hurt. I'm not gonna feel quite as tired when I get done with those. But here you are with a horrific
right.
injury, and they're like, you're free to do the hardest leg
The
lifts that
hardest
are,
stuff.
yeah,
Yeah.
but the easy ones, no, stay away from that. That's gonna screw your world
Uh,
up.
and then even in some of it was even obviously building strength back up. Like, I mean, I think it was, like I said, even with the surgery and downtime, 6, 7, 8 months before I could do anything. So the muscle atrophy on my left leg was vicious. Um, but even then, learning how to relift, because I had I'd been watching some things, and I'd heard Louis Simmons talking, and he's a legendary strength coach out of Ohio, and he says something, and I'd never thought of it. And he's like, so many people squatting, right? It's all this quad dominant stuff. They don't work their hamstrings enough. And he's like, that's why there's so many ACL injuries, because no one works their hamstrings. And I'm like, wait, what? Never heard that before. So I researched it. It's kind of true. So I'm like, okay. And so I literally even relearned how to lift. So even when I squat, to where I can engage my hamstrings and not just my quads, which also allows me to squat more. So,
Okay.
there was a lot of learning curve to get to where, and I get in trouble every so often now because if you notice, I don't wear a big ACL brace when I wrestle.
Right. Yeah, that's another reason why I was so
I've
shocked to
got
know
one.
is
Yeah, I've got one. And if I ever have a day where it's feeling really wonky, I might throw it on when I wrestle because that's happened a few times. Uh, but yeah, I mean, I wear like a, you know, just regular shock doctor knee brace like a whole lot of other wrestlers wear,
um,
and
just kind of sticking
so
with
far it
all
holds up.
this. Sticking with all of this, I've wanted to ask, like, I've, knock on wood here, never had quite the injury yet of something like that. But, like, I'm not even to my mid 30s yet, and I'm already kind of noticing, like, okay, my knees are starting to hurt a little more getting out of bed. My back's starting to hurt a little more getting out of bed. My wrists are hurting. My elbows are hurting more after, a biceps day. So, kind of in that same man,
Right.
like, I couldn't imagine going back to just powerlifting after such a horrific injury. Like, you mentioned the rehab and all the, like, stuff they had you do just to get your body back to normal, but or as normal as it can be. What is it like just to, like, then once you're back to normal, like you mentioned atrophy, you mentioned just all that time away when and you're somebody who's so used to being athletic and doing stuff and then just not being able to do that. How is the process of getting back into shape? How is the process of getting back to your old weightlifting numbers after such an injury like that?
Hard and humbling. It's it's very it's very humbling, and realizing like I'd have to drop some weight and work some things and kind of build up to it. And I mean, people can ask. My wife was an athlete and all that, and I don't do good when I'm laid up. I don't do good when I can't go. You know,
Right.
so even mentally, it's like it's vicious. I don't like not being able to. I want to go. I'm going to go. I don't
Right.
like. I can't do this or I can't do that. Like I'm not okay with that. Like I don't like. I think after the knee surgery, I had to be on bed rest for 2 weeks, and that was miserable. Like people having to literally bring me food or do this or do this for me or do that for me, and I hated every minute of it. And it
Um,
was kind of one of those like I'm going to build this back because I don't like this life. I'm not going
right.
to be this person. So I had to come back. Like I had to build it back. I wasn't ready to be done. But my goals are insane. I'm one of those people like I still won't be able to compete in powerlifting in my 60.
Right.
So I'm a little out there.
That's not necessarily a bad thing. So you mentioned, like, having to, like, just drop weight. You don't have to go into too big a detail, but, like, so, like, take me through, like, okay, you're clear, you can lift like you once, you can at least do the exercises that you once did. You're
Yeah.
clear. How how low did you have to go on the weight compared to where you were? How many less reps did you have to do compared to where you once were with repetitions? I don't know, like, how much, like,
My
cardio you do, but, like, how much less cardio, or, like, how, like, did you have to do or to build back up to your old cardio shape? Like, take me through that.
cardio took a while just because I didn't do any. I just wasn't allowed to do anything for so long. So cardio I felt is what took the longest. Getting that kind of wind and that gas tank back. Um, Man, I'll tell you what. I bet just working sets on deadlift. I bet I had to drop 200 to 300 pounds uh, just to make sure that it wasn't just like my right leg dominating the movement to where my left leg was working.
Right.
Uh, I mean, so just on deadlift and squats, like massive drop. Obviously bench press less because it's upper body.
Right.
But yeah, deadlift and squats, leg dominant movements. I bet 200 to 300 pounds on working sets, just uh, trying to rebuild the muscles and get the leg to, the muscles to activate. So, both legs were working, not just one leg overpowering it. And, yeah, that was, and there were some days in the gym, like just miserable. Like I cannot believe this is all I can do right now. Like just this much weight and this many, uh, it was crazy, and it's one of those, you just kind of have to telling yourself on the bad days, like, okay, trust the process, trust the process. Like, it's going to get there. You got to trust the process. Like, this is a marathon. It's not a sprint, and, and so, I mean, I just had to keep that mindset, uh, and I've, I tell guys all the time, you get in wrestling, you got to start getting comfortable with that. You're throughout my life, I've herniated discs in my back. I've broken or dislocated all my fingers, most of my toes. I got bone chips missing in an ankle, the knees torn up. Well, I think, I don't know, something in I tore something. Oh, I tore an ab muscle once. It's got like a knot in there, like it never healed right. Uh, you know, these things are going to happen. There are some ventures that you get into just with you've got to go with the realization, like, some things are going to hurt. You're going to have pain. You're going to have injuries.
Right.
If this is what you want, you have to realize this is the reality. Like I still do, powerlifting. There's some workouts I go that I'm going to go do them. They scare me. Like, I'm trying to move an amount of weight. If I screw up or this thing drops on me, like, I could die. I have to be okay with that. Like,
Right.
that's just the nature of it. You gotta, but if you can rationalize that in your head and you can be okay with that, it's amazing what you can accomplish. But you have to deal in the reality of it. So it's, as my dad once said I think the first time I tweaked my back, I heard a disc in my back. Well, son, there's a price to pay for that lifestyle you live. Oh, yeah, you got a point. It's just, it just is,
Going back to Stride, so you attend the show, you're impressed. When you get your rehab done, when you're back, back and ready to go, you're ready to begin in Stride. What are some of your memories of first coming back to the ring and first starting with Stride Pro Wrestling as a wrestler?
Man, I tell you, just in all reality, kind of, I was just so ready to get back in that ring, and lack of a better term, kind of throw somebody around. But especially coming back, and even I think that first year back, having that feud I had with Chris Hargis, because I think we went like a year of working, of wrestling against each other, interfering in each other's matches, everything, like, for a solid year. But I mean, he's so good. He really is. It was a very enjoyable experience. And then obviously, there's still in this business, you can work with people and sometimes they become your friends. And, I was also very fortunate that, Hargis became a friend. He was in my wedding. So to come back, be able to have like this really good just year of good matches, and basically people here not ever seeing the work I did, out west,
Right.
and be kind of introduced to that, like, that was a very different experience.
Right.
So that was, felt very rewarding, which is nice, and then sometimes it gets weird, like because people don't realize, Matheus men, there's there's not a whole lot of difference in between those two people. You know, as my wife likes to say, that line's very thin. Like there's not really a whole lot of separation between the two. I'm the same person, really. I just when I'm in the ring, I get to be the me that I don't have to. I get to be the me that would probably get arrested if I was in town.
um, your your character, you mentioned like the me that would get arrested. Your character is a
Yeah,
very intense, badass individual. Uh, you know, Great presence. I'm right. I mean, like I love all your work, and I love the presence that you bring to Stride. So, and you mentioned, we talked earlier about you're an ECW fan, you're a New Japan fan, you'd watch, a lot of MMA and strong style sort of wrestling. So, how do you take that? That presence, that character, this bigger than life persona that you put out there, and then how do you switch it when you wrestle something that's a little bit more entertainment based, like wrestle a Dexter Roswell, or recently seeing you wrestle B-Rad, wrestling all these guys that are great talents, but just have a very different presence in the ring than yourself.
yeah. Um, really, uh, I really don't. Obviously, the intensity is always still going to be there, and obviously, some people, yeah, me being me, I can say this, being a class above some people, I can go from having to be on. Now I'm on, but now I can have a little bit of fun because I'm not in jeopardy of of them being able to kind of get one up on me.
Right.
You know, B-Rad is not a Brandon Espinosa. So
Right.
I get to you know still big badass, still going to do the things I enjoy to do. I'm just able to take some enjoyment in them as opposed to got to go straight to the next thing and go until it's just a different it's a different piece. So when I can enjoy some things of what I'm doing, I try to enjoy them because right, what's life without some enjoyment? But
Exactly.
I mean that's the people that have been around me for long periods of time, they'll tell you that the same me that walks through a curtain for any wrestling company, that's the same guy that walks through, made the ramp way down to the cage. That's the same guy that was out on a mission in Iraq. It's that same, persona. So I mean, for me, it's not even persona. This is just who I am. It's just when it's time to go, I'm on. That intensity and everything's there because at the end of the day, it's me versus you, and I don't plan on going anywhere.
Okay.
So I mean, it's all the same, Which, now, like I said, it's great in the wrestling ring. Uh, my wife is not always thrilled, but.
um. So other than Stride, are you wrestling anywhere else? I know like there's a lot that's severely limited, based on COVID restrictions.
Right.
But
Yeah. Yeah.
you are you in a non-COVID world? Or are you where all you usually at? And are there any other places that have popped up since then that maybe you'd like to try out eventually? Do you have any long-term goals?
I luckily before COVID hit, me and Hargis went out and we wrestled while we were the Stride tag champs. We went and wrestled for the tag belts in New Era. Um, came up short to a couple of luchadors, but they're good. Uh, so the show's starting back up. I like getting back out to Colorado. I enjoy wrestling out there. I enjoy being in that Denver area in the Rocky Mountains. It's a good time. Um, OVW now being open back up, shorter drive, but I would like to go out there just because I see what they have on TV. I feel like seeing what they have there. I don't feel like they have someone like me. So I'd like to go out there, and then of course, being a wrestler and grappler and all that, I would love at some point be able to try to get on one of those Josh Barnett Bloodsport
Oh, that'd be awesome.
shows, just because again, the guys that get out there, I feel fit in very well with that group. So there's some places I travel, and I tell you what, I still do watch wrestling. I still be a fan. I'm a big fan of some of the stuff they're doing in MLW.
Okay.
I would definitely like to get out there, and then I always wanted to go out to Japan, and just haven't been. But I would like to get that done. I've had a couple buddies, not so much New Japan, but with like pro wrestling, knowing some of those, they've made it out to Japan and have really enjoyed it. And my wife she's in the Navy. She spent 6 years in Japan, and
Nice.
Everybody I've talked to just says, it's just a beautiful country, and it's just an interesting country. So I'd like to be out there, but so much of that's kind of where I feel like even before MMA guys were doing pro wrestling here, a lot of them were doing it out there.
Right.
Lesnar and Lashley and Mark Coleman, a lot of those guys were doing MMA, but they were also doing pro wrestling out there. So that strong style and all that, I feel like there's not a lot of people to work the way I work out there. There'd be more people that work the way I work, so I feel like I could have some very, very interesting, very intense matches out there. So there's a lot of guys out there that I still follow, and not even necessarily, even the top draws out there. Like I watch Tamura Ishii.
Right.
And I think that dude is incredible. I'd love to have a match with him. I would love to
awesome.
wrestle Suzuki. I think Suzuki is incredible. And then obviously their top guys there are just, on another level. Okada is amazing. Tanahashi, you can't say anything bad about him.
Oh, no.
Jay White and some of those guys, Tama Tonga, Tonga Loa, Haku's kids, Grills of Destiny, they just have some guys out there that like the work that they can put into a match is really impressive.
So I have some listeners for this that haven't seen Stride before and haven't really, maybe not super familiar with your work, and I'm one of the things I'm happy about is I know I've gotten people from New York and California to check out Stride Pro Wrestling on YouTube. So if one of those subscribers that's not from the Midwest were to listen to this and see your picture and say, I want to see a Roger Matheus match, what match would you guide them towards that could be on the internet or could be somewhere for you to go, check this out, this is the match to introduce you to my style?
Just because I know it's on there, I've seen it. Mine and Hatton's TLC match, I've seen that on YouTube. I feel like that's a good one. In all reality, was it Rise Up? Whatever the last Stride show was. I'm bad with the names because I know we just did Mayday. I can't remember now because it was Rising Up. I don't think it's Traverse. I think it was Rising Up, but the finals for the AC title, me and SB, I feel that was a really solid match. But it's definitely a very good example of like that good, like a hard hitting, strong style type match. One I wish was online. It's not. Was a few years back, but me and Jay Spade had a last man standing match, and I'd put that match up against almost any match in Stride, or really even on the independent circuit, because we beat the hell out of each other for about 30 minutes.
Damn,
And
I
I
haven't seen that
wish
match.
somebody had it recorded.
I wish I could see it because I
Yeah,
haven't seen that match.
I've tried to look for it, but I mean, there was chair shots and wet floor signs, and there was a package pile driver on the ring apron. Um, at one point in that match, I'm down on the ground. There's a steel chair on my head, and Spade came off the top rope with another steel chair, and that wasn't the finish. But it was a really good story leading up to that. But then that match was, I mean, it was incredible. So I mean, kudos to Spade, smaller guy, but you were talking about a guy that can he can turn it on and he can work with the best of them. Yeah, there's a few of them out there that I feel are really good.
Last question, but you've just become the Legacy Champion in that match with SB we talked about. Defended against B-Rad at the last Stride show. Got another title defense coming up, but not knocking any talent, and not as with all due respect to the whole Stride roster because they're all great. But if you could have a dream title defense of somebody in Stride or maybe even out of Stride, who would you want to come in and try and see if they can win that Legacy Championship from you?
Well, I can't do it now because he's retired from the business. But before he was retired from the business, I always wanted to have a match against Raven. Just because he was good, and he was a lot better than a lot of people realize. But even like now, if I could have a match against anybody, and people are still active because Vampiro's retired pretty much now too. Man, I think Pentagon Jr.
Okay, I'd pay to see that. I'd pay a lot of money to see that match.
Like, I watched him. I watched him for years, and I mean, at Lucha Underground and everywhere he's been, and I really feel he might be, in my opinion, he might be one of, I mean, and everybody knows he's good, but I really feel he might be one of the most underrated guys in the business right now. But that dude is good,
And such
and
a
he at least seems
too.
like he hits. Yeah, it gets carried, but I mean, he hits some things, and it's it don't look like he's pulling a whole lot back on that. Like,
Right.
it looks like he's putting some heat on some things. But yeah, no, that dude, I would, yeah, I'd want to work here. That I think would be fun. It would hurt later, but it would be fun.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to do this interview. Like I've since I got regularly watching Stride again after you guys started watching shows, I've always really wanted to talk to you and get this interview. Do you have a public social media for anybody who might want to follow you, or just look up some of your stuff?
Thanks. What do I got? Yeah, I've got my Instagram. Might be to Roger Matheus. I think the tag is Mad Viking 13. With underscores in between Mad Viking and then an underscore between Viking and 13. And then obviously I've got my Facebook page with Roger Mitten, but that's got everything on it. I try to make sure that I share anything that's Stride has coming up. I try to also do the business, some good deeds when I know people are doing other stuff and try to share that. So either one of those places, you'll usually find plenty of wrestling stuff or follow what I'm doing. And especially with Instagram, you'll also see a lot of whatever crazy lifting crap I come up with because I built a gym and and I just I try to lift heavy weights, and then I try to find really ridiculous ways to make it harder. So
Do you? I know I've said the last question, but here's just another last workout question. Do you like having a home gym more than going to a gym, or do you still prefer going to like a Gold's or a Planet Fitness?
uh, I like having home gym. Like there's just one or two guys I like the golds that I could bump into, and that was fun. But I would constantly get tired of like, okay, I want to go do this part of my workout, and then you got four guys surround a bench. There's one girl there. Everybody's trying to get a number, and I'm just kind of like, I bet if I discus throw this 45-pound plate, I can take them out and they'll move, and I can do my workout. And then I have to be like, no, because I'm going to be working out in the jail cell. So and with my home gym, I was able to get stuff people don't have around here. I got a reverse hyper from West Side. Really works my back more. I've got safety squat bars and bent bars, and I've got squat bars, power bars. So I don't have to worry about anybody being in my way. I've got every about specialty bar I could want for the things that I do. So I mean, I can change a workout and not even have to do a different lift, but I can just change the bar and make the lift different. So it's kind of a nice situation to have. When I was lifting at Gold's anyway, I was lifting by myself because nobody wants to lift crazy like I do. So now I just don't have people in my way or looking at me like I'm funny or get mad because I use chalk.
Yeah, there's a lot of people don't like the chalk at the gym I go to, but it's when you're powerlifting, chalk's the best thing for you.
Hey, it makes a difference. I watched my wife was trying to do a max squat at Gold's. They had no bars with center knurling. Uh, I can't remember how much she had on there, 275, almost 300 pounds. And she got underneath it and right into no chalk. And she tried to squat down, and because there was no center knurling, the bar literally started to roll off her back.
Oh wow.
So the next time that we were going to do, I'm like, this isn't safe. If they're not going to have center knurling, like we have to have chalk so there's something for your shirt to grab hold of. So we did. I brought chalk and we chalked up her back so she could do the squat. And there's some people like, oh, they're mad. I'm like, just give me a mop or a paper towel. It's chalk. I can wipe it up.
Right.
If you don't want me to use chalk, then get a bar that's not going to slip off people's backs. They didn't like that very much, but I mean, chalk. You get a little mad, I clean it up. My wife gets hurt on a lift because you don't have the proper equipment, and then you've got me coming over your counter. Which one do you want?
I definitely allow the chalk, and but now we know
Yeah,
on record, Roger Mathis, the advocate for the home gym.
exactly. Yeah, I like it. It's nice. We weren't using the garage anyway, so I'm not in any trouble.
Oh, that's awesome. But again, thank you so much for being on the show. If you enjoyed this video, please everyone give it a like, share, subscribe for more content, not just from the world of pro wrestling, but from the world of comic books, gaming, anime, and all things geek culture. Definitely check out Roger. I'll put a link to the show with the Espinosa match, so you can definitely check out his work. He's phenomenal. And follow me on my social media pages, facebook.com/athleticgeeka9, Twitter athletic_geeka9, Instagram athleticgeeka9. And if you'd like to help improve the channel financially, I am on Patreon, patreon.com/athleticgeeka9. Check out Roger Mathis, check out Stride Pro Wrestling, and we'll see y'all next time.